Welcome to the Dork Forest. Jackie and her pals will never bore us. Shameless confessions
about our obsession
will make us laugh and smile. So let's explore the Dork Forest and dork out for a while.
Hi, it's Jackie Cation, and you are listening to the Dork Forest. The website's JackieCation.com, DorkForest.com, TheDorkForest.com if you like a determiner. Let's do the credits. Patrick Brady's going to fix this audio and video. Vilmos works on JackieCation.com, and Mike Ruekberg sang the song with his wife, Sarah. He composed it, and he will sing his version of the Mexican hat dance at the end of this show. Thank you so much for listening to the Dork Forest. Here's a scoop. I'm doing stand-up online. A lot of Zoom shows will eventually go back on the road. Sign up for my email list. It's easy to get off. It's harder to get on than it is to get off. And no harm, no foul. If ever bored, JackieCation.com, sign up for the email list. You'll find out about my weekly Zoom shows and stand up on the road eventually. You may donate to the show if you would like. I would like. Sure, I would. There's PayPal, Jackie at JackieCation.com, and there is a PayPal button on both DorkForest.com and JackieCation.com. And there's Venmo, if you like Venmo, Jackie-Cation, oddly enough. If you have listened to all of the shows, go to dorkforest.bandcamp.com, I think. The Dork Forest has a Bandcamp page. You can listen to a lot of ones that are free from pre-2009 when I started pre-recording. And then there's live episodes that cost me a couple of bucks, so I charge you a couple of bucks. There's also some stand-up. There's a story album that's very exciting there. And other than that, I have a lot of merch in my garage. Feel free to order if you know anybody who doesn't have any CDs or the DVD. And you can follow me everywhere at Jackie Cation. Let's get into the show. Hi, Jackie Cation. I'm in my living room, you guys. And with me, Ramon Rivas II. How are you, sir?
Hello. I'm mostly okay. Sometimes that answer frightens people, and I'm like, but it's better than bad.
Right, and it's what it feels like. I think it feels a little too real. It feels real.
Yes, it would really throw people in LA because people in LA are used to like, oh, I'm good, and then like just no depth to the conversation.
Wow, you are under an illusion if you think. Are you rolling one? Is that what's happening?
For after.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. It's a podcast, my friend, and we are recording it, but and it is a video, and it's legal here, man. As far as we know,
yeah,
it's legal everywhere. It's beautiful. I think wherever you go, if you don't just say fine and you're not good friends, people are like, oh, all right, man. All right.
You're putting too much onto me.
I too have that exact same feeling. Pretty good for what's happening. Pretty good for what's happening.
Man.
I live indoors. Yeah. Things are going well. If it's all, here we go, Ramon.
Yes.
Rivas II, which I like that you got the second, and I like that you keep it there. You know, like in your email and stuff like that. It's nice. It's a nice tribute.
Yeah, I mean, it's to differentiate myself from my dad, because one of us has worse credit than the other,
I'm hoping it's you.
I found out I surprisingly have very good credit. I have no real money, but I have hypothetical money.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's it. They're waiting for you to get some money, but because until then you're doing just fine. That's cool. So you, stand-up comic, our mutual friend, Mr. Ron Funches, introduced us. And it's at Blazer Ramon on everything, like Instagram and Twitter and all that, right? Mm-hmm. And you have comedy albums. What are the name of those comedy albums, and where can people find them?
The first album's called Revisited. It's a compilation album I put out at the beginning of the pandemic of stuff I did on my Comedy Central half hour and like a mix of some other material from other performances.
Oh, cool.
And then the second album I put out is called Stick to Comedy. And that just is a bunch of political material that kind of like always has like a shelf life, but it still functions. Yeah. But it was kind of put out in response to the people who, like, over the summer, over all the unrest, people would be like, well, why don't you just stick to comedy? Like, I don't come to you for this type of thing. And it's like, well, here's me doing comedy, but
Great.
within the sphere.
Yeah, and look what I brought you.
Politics.
I brought you
a little bit of this.
A little bit of that. Yeah. Why don't we? Why don't you stick to insurance adjusting and not also be an entire citizen? So.
Yeah. And so I put those out there, available anywhere you listen to music. So
all the Spotify.
Apple Music, Spotify. If you got Tidal, listen to it on Tidal. That pays artists the most per spin.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then do you have a podcast? I forgot to ask.
I do. There's a podcast called PreBaked. I did for 2 seasons. It's kind of like cannabis and culture.
Sure.
Every guest that I have, I kind of pair a strain of cannabis that kind of reminds me of them, and get into why, and then we just have like a sprawling random conversation.
Oh, that's cool. What you're curating the marijuana with a person that you know well enough that you're like, this is what this person might enjoy. This kind of thing.
Yeah, like a sommelier.
Yeah. Like a pot sommelier. That's kind of awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So that one's called PreBaked, and there's 2 seasons of that. Do you have a new one or?
No, I was doing them in my travels, and then like the pandemic kind of stopped that. I chopped up an album of like greatest hits from the podcast, so that will be out on 4/20 this year. But that's just kind of like a taster, and if you like that, then you check out the podcast and go from there.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, now this is we haven't done this dorkdom. Ramon Rivas, by the way, the second. We're going to be talking about, and I've been surprised because it's critically acclaimed. It's been literally people that are into the show, and even people who aren't have literally said it might be the best piece of television that's ever been made. And,
it's so beautiful.
And it's called The Wire, and it was on HBO. Mm-hmm. And how many seasons were there?
There were 5 seasons.
Okay.
And it had the misfortune of kind of being on at what they call the golden age of television. So it was always up in the running against The Sopranos and all these other like prolific.
Right. When it first burst out, like everybody was psyched about Oz and Orange is the New Black. I mean, HBO was knocking it out of the park right and left, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so David Simon, I think his first series was Homicide: Life on the Streets, which was like a crime procedural on NBC, I think.
Okay.
But he worked in the police department. He worked in the news. So he kind of used his real life experiences to inform what he wound up creating.
Right. And so this was ensemble cast, and every season, if I remember right, has a different story, right? Sort of one arc per season.
Yeah, I mean, the overall arc of the whole series is just the police and the drug culture, the symbiotic relationship between the two. And then really in the city of Baltimore, like you get a feel for what the city is like. Through all these different characters. I often compare it to like Game of Thrones as far as like the intense amount of characters you are introduced to and expected to kind of like know without any explanation or context.
Yeah.
Which helps.
I'm sure everybody is, because it's in it. I tried to watch it, and I believe I saw the first season, but I remember just sort of just backing slowly away from the television going, nope. This is gonna give me nightmares, man. And
it's very intense.
Yeah, so there's the neighbor, there's the police, and then there's the neighborhood that they're in, right?
There's the police and then the drug crews that they're investigating. So like I started watching the show on like the last season was airing. I think the first episode I saw was like season 5, episode 4. And so it's like, I know nothing about any of these characters. It just seemed like an interesting narrative. Like the last season of the show deals with politics, policing, crime, and then how the media coverage affects how all of that interacts with each other.
Okay.
And the one of the main characters in the last season just like makes up a bunch of crimes, and then that kind of wags the dog of this political and policing machine.
Yeah.
and which at the time seemed a little ridiculous, but now in the era of fake news and everything that's been happening, it's like, oh, that's very easy to see how spin happens, and it just affects, how the
Right.
fallout for people.
Yeah, it feels like it. Sometimes with television that epic, it feels like they're either revealing something that already exists, or they're teaching people how to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you're like, oh shit, don't tell people how to do that because they just the world's full of. So there's a bunch of liars, man. They'll just take this and run
Yeah.
with it,
Mhm.
So, okay, so tell me first season. What's the plot? This is going to be a lot of
Uh,
spoilers, you guys, and you should have
Yeah,
seen it because
sorry,
it was
spoiler alert.
When was it? When did it run? When did it air?
Oh man, it feel like the first season was in 2000 or 2001. Like you can kind of see in in the first episode, they kind of laid the groundwork of, the FBI is like kind of ending their investigations into drugs and
Yeah.
gang war to focus on terrorism. So it's shortly after 9/11 is when the series started. And you
Okay.
can tell because the pagers are still around, people are still using payphones. Like it feels very like dated.
Yeah.
Text messages are like in season 5, like text messages wind up being like a big plot point.
Yeah.
This new thing that kids love.
The kids and they're
Um,
texting. So we're talking. So this probably ran from like 2001 to 2006.
I
show?
feel like till maybe 2007, but that feels about right. About a season every year or two.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's right.
and,
'Cause- yeah.
and season 1, huge ensemble cast. Mostly character actors. Like no one had really like. No one was a marquee. There was no, I felt like there was no one who was like anchoring, like, this is the star, this is who you're tuning in to see. Um, it was just I feel like the biggest star from the first season was probably Michael B. Jordan, who's
Wow.
gone on to a huge amount of acclaim, but he just played one of the kids who works in the Pit, which is like the low-rise tenement government housing buildings.
Okay.
And so there's a group of the drug dealers centered around the Barksdale family. And so there's Avon Barksdale, who's the kingpin, and they just kind of like very intimidating. They kill a lot of witnesses, and they intimidate witnesses out of in court and get his nephew D'Angelo kind of off for killing someone.
Oh wow.
So that's kind of happens in the first episode. And then that kind of puts in motion this police detective, Jimmy McNulty. He talks to the judge, kind of speaks out of shop, and betrays the cop trust who, like, you don't put our business out to anybody, and kind of says, like, no one's investigating this dude. He's beating us on all these murders. And then the judge winds up kind of like pressuring the police chiefs to investigate this crew. So they put a detail together.
Oh, okay. Wow. So it was like there's no stars. There's stars that came out of it. Michael B. Jordan's huge. I even
Huge
know
now.
who he am.
Yeah.
I granted I know it because he was Killmonger, and
Yeah.
and he has been the comedy club owner, the guy who owns Bloomington, has referred to him as the best looking person on the planet. Michael B.
Probably
Jordan.
he's up there.
Yeah, it's got to be pretty damn close.
Yeah,
Anyway.
and it's weird to see him, as Killmonger, you see him as this big, and in the show, he's just this skinny, small little teenage. It's such a jarring difference to see like where he was to where he is.
Right.
But the other people is Jimmy McNulty's played by this dude, Dominic West, who I feel like he was in 300 as like the
Okay.
one of the senators who was bad, and he's also in that show The Affair on Showtime. So he's in things still, but kind of again like he was a British dude who's playing this like American Baltimore detective.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. So just, but it's just an ensemble cast of working actors that people were just amazing. And I looked it up. It's 2002 to 2008. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's that's awesome. So okay, so the detail gets together. The British guy is
Yeah.
he puts together a pile of cops to go
So he
investigate.
doesn't put them together. The shit kind of trickles downhill from the judge onto the operations officer, onto the department heads, onto this lieutenant who gets put in charge of this investigation, and he gets a bunch of just super shitty cops. They put
Oh, they
drunks on there. They give him someone who's been in the pawn shop unit for like 13 years. They
okay.
give him Mcnulty, who's kind of just been the troublemaker, so they're like, watch out for him, and just kind of like, yeah, investigate this, but we don't want you. We don't want any wiretaps. We don't want it. We don't want any sprawl. Just dope on the table and keep it moving.
Wow. So
Um,
just bad news bears. Just like
basically,
yeah.
basically. But it also kind of gives you a look at there's this heroic projection onto all police action, and you kind of get to see the machinations behind everything. That it's not always, even though McNulty is ultimately trying to stop crime, you see the hesitancy of the whole police department to do anything that's against how they normally do things.
Right. They don't want to rock the boat against other cops, and they know that there's
No.
grift or something or
Mm-hmm.
graft.
Just speaking, just because, like, well, this is so the first season keeps going, and they wind up locking up Avon by the end of the season. As they're investigating him, one of the police officers gets shot. That's the episode I told you, The Cost. I believe it
Yeah.
was episode 10 of the first season. That's really the episode I say, like, if you have to make it to that point to get fully invested.
Okay.
I feel like it's the same thing as in Game of Thrones, that point where like Dany comes out with the dragons. Like
Yeah.
if you've quit before then, you're not gonna like the show. But
Yeah.
if you can get to that point, you have something to hold on to now.
Right.
So the police officer's death kind of, or not death, but gets shot in the line of duty, kind of affects, like, it changes, like the police department goes into, all right, well, now we just got to dope on the table, arrest, like we just have to show we're doing something because this is unacceptable. And it winds up fucking up the investigation. Like, they, instead of sitting and watching the main distributor and tracking who's getting drugs and following and figuring all that out, they wind up just making everyone write warrants on all the places they have and going in and just nipping it in the bud, because following the money, they wind up a bag man from a politician picks up money from one of the drug pits.
Oh God.
So the police pull this bag man over, and the higher ups are like, hey, we didn't tell you to do this. You have to give this dude his money back.
Yeah. Holy shit. So it's just corruption all the way up the line.
All the way up the line. And so that politician winds up playing a bigger and bigger role as the seasons go on. But the first season really just focuses on the police and the street and just their interaction over the specific investigation.
Right.
But it clues you into kind of the rest of the city, like the kids who are in this drug crew. You see that they just live in like an abandoned apartment. They steal electricity from like the line outside. You get to see Michael B. Jordan in a really beautiful one shot, like getting up all these kids who are staying in this place and like getting them ready for school and like giving them like the little bit of food they have. It's like a really cool scene. And then
Right.
you wind up connecting with a lot of these characters, and then a lot of their stakes, they're either their lives are cost or their freedom is taken away.
Man, I just got chills when you told me that because I can just see the pile of kids just squatting and
Squatting.
and then just Michael B. Jordan just going, you got to go to school. You got to.
Yeah, like one of them, he's like,
guys.
where's your book bag? He's like, we ain't got no homework today. And it's like, you can already tell that kid's going to be out on the corner, being a lookout. Like, you can kind of see these small little blips, the details. Like the main thing from The Wire is like everything matters. and all the details add up. So like it's a bad show to have on while you're doing other things.
Okay.
Because it does require you to kind of have some sort of focus on what's happening,
because everything matters, and
Mm-hmm.
that is something I think I was just emotionally, it just kept dragging these emotions out of me. And it was
Yes.
whether it was rage or whether it was just sadness or whether it was just even the appreciation of the Michael Jordan character, Michael B. Jordan character, would have been like, yeah, you're doing it, you're helping, you're being part of it, and you're just like, but then you see the kid who's is not going to make it. And you just
Yeah.
want to burst into tears, which is hard for me to watch that kind of television. I feel like
Yeah.
yeah, that's hard.
Yeah. And so there's another scene that stands out where Michael B. Jordan, one of the little kids, is like having trouble with a math problem. And he's like, how you can't do the problem? And he changes the dynamics from like people on a bus and getting dropped off and picked up to, okay, you're working a ground stash. You have this many vials. Someone comes and picks up this many. Someone comes and picks up this many. They drop off this many. Someone comes and picks this many. How many you got left? And the kid closes their eyes and answers it correctly. And he's like, how the fuck can you keep the count right, but you can't do the problem?
Yeah.
And the kid's like, count be wrong, they fuck you up.
Okay.
And so it's like the stakes of getting this wrong are way more intense than getting this math problem wrong.
Right.
Because the math problem in school doesn't speak to me.
Right. And there's there aren't any the consequences. The stakes are much higher. Yeah. Wow.
And so the second season still kind of carries that over. The details now still investigating major crimes. They're still looking into this drug crew. But they start to add in how the drugs get into the city. And so they do that through the lens of the docks. The corruption on the docks is they're not directly involved in the drug trade, but they're complicit because they're paid to just get these cargo units off the dock without notice. And what's in them is anyone's guess. Drugs, the impetus of the season is a shipping container full of dead women is found on the dock by a customs police officer played by she's fantastic. She's in so much shit. She's in The Office. She played Michael's lady in The Office. What the fuck is her name? She's in The Office. She's the goofy HR lady who's like there for a couple seasons and
Amy
leaves
Ryan?
and comes back. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's Amy Ryan. But she plays this port detective Beatty Russell, and they find all these girls dead in this container, and like the investigative people are like, well, they were dead in the water, so they're just at this point it's just paperwork. Like there's no crime here. And so she's kind of left alone investigating these, I think it was a dozen dead mystery women with no IDs in this shipping container.
Did she play someone called Beatty Russell?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Amy Ryan. Wow.
Yeah. So again, I didn't really know her well in this role, but like seeing her in other stuff since I've watched the show, you always are like, oh, yeah, that person.
Yeah.
Out here shining. And so Jimmy McNulty comes, the Dominic West character comes back into play. He's since been ostracized from the investigative unit. Now he got kind of relegated to working on a boat for being such a problem maker.
Right, he's a meddler.
And he's a meddler. He's super unhappy. And so he finds a floating dead woman in the water. And then the shipping container with these dead women has an extra pallet. And so he kind of figures out, oh, this person probably was in here. And then he's very petty and does all the water mapping to prove that these women died in Baltimore City jurisdiction so that his old bosses have to eat all these dead bodies and investigate them. And then it backfires because his friends on the force wind up getting assigned to the case instead of the dude he thought it was.
Oh.
As you're going through this lens, you start to see these doc characters, their moral compass slowly deteriorates. There's the head of the union is this dude Frank Sabatka, who he's trying to do his best to salvage the union. He's trying to get the docks dredged so that they can get more ships there. He's trying to get the shipping canal cleared. He's trying to do like big stakes thing to kind of save his industry, because it's gone from, like I live in Lorraine, and we used to have steelyard, shipyard, auto industry, and you used to be able to set your watch to seeing people going into work and coming out with their little mailboxes. So they do a really good job of showing this, it kind of the specific industry crumbling.
Right.
And the people who are members of the union barely get any work, or very sporadically they'll be busy, but then they'll go like weeks without anything.
Right.
And so you kind of see the same stakes that lead these people in the ghettos to get turned to drugs, because that's the main economic engine available to them.
Mm-hmm.
These white characters who work at kind of start to get swayed the same way.
Right.
And
so you get to see the parallel corruption. So
yes.
each season has Yeah, it turns out humanity, man. Jesus.
Yeah, it does a very, I mean, it's definitely more deserved. Feels like more like a Pulitzer type of experience that you're watching.
Right.
And so one of his Frank Sabaka's nephew and son play a pivotal role throughout the season. The son's kind of this fuck up who he gets to stay in the union and employ just to the nepotism of who his dad is. And his cousin's kind of just this rugged, like, no nonsense dude who's just trying to, like, he's got a girl, he's got a kid, and he's living in his parents' basement and barely getting any work, doesn't have a car. So he just kind of feels.
Yeah. Just keeping his head down and trying to make enough money and he lives in his parents' basement with his wife and kid.
Yeah. Well, he lives in his parents' basement, and his wife or his girl will come over and stay, but she can't go upstairs because, like, he doesn't want his parents to. It's just like a very, like, fuck boyish position for this. But it's like he's trying his best. He's just like, fuck, this is the hand he got dealt.
Yep.
And so him and his cousin steal a canister. They see some money from that. Their uncle finds out, and then just kind of like tells them to, like, gives them a little talking to, but then it's like, not to spread any of the money around or show too much money. And so it's like you're condoning this.
Yep. You're complicit.
Slow tumble.
Yeah. What's did you have a favorite episode in season 2? I forget.
Yeah, I put hold on. Got my TV on here so I can see. Season 2, I picked there's a episode 9 is called Stray Rounds.
Yeah.
The reason I picked that one is because an innocent child is killed in, like, the shootout between these two corner crews. And so you see the emotional fallout of the community from that. And then you also see the kind of callous response by the police department, as far as, like, oh, now we got to go do all this stuff, or now we're waving the flag just to do, like, they're not enthused to have to go out and parade around.
Right. And they're not invested in trying to actually solve the crime because they don't think they can, or they already know, or.
Well, it's just one of those. It's just one of those, like, okay, we're getting around to doing this stuff. It's a shame. Like, one of the characters says, it's a shame it took till a 9-year-old to get killed for us to get around to doing all this.
Yeah.
And then there's a character, Major Colvin, who's like, and what exactly are we doing? And that's kind of the first few bit of screen time for him, but he plays a major role in season 3. But season 2, they wind up, they start to track the group who's bringing the bulk amount of drugs into the city. Right. But they just wind up missing him due to the like, you get to see a lot of the failures of investigating, like in the the Stray Rounds episode, the group, one of the groups who was shooting guns, they're like, clean the guns and go throw them into the river. And so they clean it, they go, he throws it over, and it lands on a garbage boat.
Oh.
And so the police wind up pulling him in, and they're grilling him, and he's feeling kind of nervous. And then they're like, we even got your fingerprints on one of these guns. And the kid's like, which one? Because he knows in his head, I cleaned all these guns. There's no way you found my fingerprints on any of these guns. They just heard his name on the street as they were investigating. And so they point out a gun that's not his, and he's like, lawyer. And so it's just like that little slip up.
Yeah.
This you don't know if he's the one who fired the shot that killed the kid, but like now your investigation, you're done with him.
Right.
You can't do it. And so the nephew, Nick Sabaka, he winds up slowly, like they steal drug ingredients for this group, the bigger group, and then they start to they pay him half in cash, half in heroin, and then he starts dealing.
Right.
And so you see kind of the relationship between him and his cousin, who's kind of been the fuck up but been trying to drug deal. You see their relationship start to fray as their egos start to come into play.
Right.
And then the fuck up one winds up wanting to like kind of, I can do all this type of shit on my own. So he orchestrates stealing some cars from the dock, makes it set up so it looks like it's an outside job. And then the big group, the cartel importers, the one winds up kind of fucking him over with the money. He's like, oh, I'm supposed to give you this much, but this is still a good amount of money for this work. And the kid's like, no, fuck that. And he's kind of the whole season, people are just fucking with this kid, just kind of like, you're a fuck up, you're picking on him, like treating him like shit. He's always fucking shit up. And he goes out and grabs a gun and shoots the dude and shoots a person in his store.
Oh, wow.
And so then his dad, who's the leader of this union, who's also having this moral reckoning and having all this come for him, now has his son's safety and life. And he didn't know he didn't find out about his son until the day after. And there's this really powerful scene where his nephew comes in and he tells him, and he's like, what the fuck do you mean? He's like, you're supposed to be looking out for him. You're his fucking cousin. He's like, you're his dad.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be looking out for him.
Wow.
And so it's just like that family's journey throughout the season is very interesting. And a lot of the characters from this dock union, which you see kind of struggling to stay afloat, in season 5, when they're dealing with like homelessness and like there's murders within the homeless community, you see a lot of these same characters that were in the union working as unemployed homeless people living under a bridge.
Oh, wow.
But it's real quick. It's
right.
such
but the attention to detail on this thing is ridiculous.
It's so
just epic.
Nuanced.
Yeah.
And then, so a lot of the same characters, like the
cop
Bubbles. This Andre Royo plays this amazing character called Bubbles, who's an addict and also an informant for the police. And so you get to kind of get a slice of like what this very charming, very likable, but very much trapped in the machinations of drug use and addiction.
Right.
He tries to get clean at various points over the series and fails to varying degrees. And in season 3, the first few seasons, Bubbles is the character's name, runs with this white boy named Johnny, and they're kind of like, a little they run little capers, little hustles on people.
Okay.
Johnny gets beat up by the group of drug dealers in the first season and put in the hospital, and Bubbles winds up, that's what leads Bubbles to start informing more heavily with the police.
Okay.
And then so in season 3, we leave the docks behind and they start to add in politics.
Okay.
So you get this dude, Tommy Carcetti, who is he's a councilman. He's on the Senate, the subcommittee for safety. he's just kind of he's a white politician in Baltimore.
And he's connected. Is he connected
and
all
he's
over the place?
connected, and you see like you get introduced to him, and you see he's kind of like, he's charming, but he's got his wife, he's got his kids, he cheats on his wife. Like within the first episode, you see him hook up with this chick he met at a fundraiser. So you kind of see like
what that guy's deal is. Yeah.
What his deal is immediately, like, oh, he talks this, he's charming like all politicians are, but he's also very, very corrupt on some level, even though he has this altruistic. Yeah, he has this altruistic hope of, oh, I want to help make Baltimore better, but it's ultimately so he will be built up and be in a position to do something. So he starts to play a presence, and you kind of start to follow him as he decides to run for mayor in Baltimore. And in order for a white man to run and win in Baltimore, he needs to split the black vote. And so the current mayor is this Mayor Clarence Royce, who's an incumbent black mayor. A character says he gets his whole ticket through. He's got coattails for days. And then Tommy Carcetti wants to run, and in order to have a chance, there has to be another black candidate, which winds up being his like really good friend in the committee. Runs, but Tommy doesn't tell him. So it's kind of like he needs him to run, but if he tells him he's running, he probably won't run. So he winds up being like real shady with him. The other thing that happens in season 3 is the detective, or the major Bunny Colvin, who in the second season said like, what exactly are we doing with this street sweeping in response to this kid getting murdered? He starts to get frustrated seeing his district just no better than when he started. It's even worse. Like he's retiring soon, so he's like, I'm gonna try something. So he decides he picks out a couple spots in his sector where it's all vacant housing, and he decides to push all the drug dealing into those sectors. And as long as the drug dealing happens in those areas, it's hands off. We're not going to arrest you. We're not going to. So he makes drug-free zones in the city of Baltimore in an effort to save the rest of his district.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the main arc of that season underneath, is like, what happens when you change the rules of the war on drugs. And so he really struggles to get them to respond to him. The episode I sent you, I think, was
in 3. Yeah.
I think it was Amsterdam. So which is an area where drugs are legal.
In Europe, yeah.
Yeah, and so you start to see the police department try to tell these drug dealers like, yo, if you go over here, you can sell without impunity. If you stay here, we're going to arrest you, put you in jail, whatever. And they're like, why are y'all fucking with us? We sell drugs and y'all hit us over the head. What are you trying to trick us for? Like, you see the hesitancy of trusting this notion. And so Colvin winds up going to the same detail from the first few seasons to get information on the mid-level drug dealers. And then he goes to them. And because you see from the police over the seasons that shit trickles downhill.
Yeah.
So he does the same logic to the drug dealers. He finds the middlemen who, you got just enough position to where you can tell someone what to do, but not enough that you can tell someone to go fuck themselves.
Right.
And so he gets them to talk to their bosses and then talk to their underlings. And then the rest of the season, you see the fallout and the impact of these drug-free zones. So they start to get outreach programs start to pop up. So needle exchanges, condom distributions, health screenings, all that type of thing. But also just people just shooting up in the streets.
And just dying.
All the kids who had been like Townsend runners for the drug, now you don't need them if you don't have to look out for the police. So now there's just groups of kids in these areas who just aren't in school, just kind of navigating about. So you start to see kind of the some of these officers who kind of had failures in the first few seasons kind of start to step up and be more community activated and start to connect a little more with what they're doing.
Yeah.
And there's Avon Barksdale gets early released from prison.
Okay.
And the new young drug kingpin Marlo Stanfield and him just immediately butt heads for corners.
Yeah.
Because the very first episode of the season, they tear down the projects, which in the first 2 seasons had housed the drug cartel's businesses.
Yeah.
They blow those up for redevelopment, which you kind of see in the second season. You start to see the battle between like these unions who are trying to maintain this property and the developers who are trying to turn it into the granary, a condominium.
Right,
and,
gentrify and yeah.
Yeah, and so the beginning of the season, they tear down these projects, which is, yay betterment, yay everything. But the imagery is they blow it up, and then the smoke and the debris just floods all over the streets. And so what used to be contained in these buildings is now all over the streets.
Wow.
And so that imagery kind of lets you know this season is all about how the fight for all these corners between these two rival gangs. Yeah, and
wow, that's this sounds just incredibly. So David Simon,
yes,
is the guy who essentially sort of created the show, right?
He created it. He created this.
And he was a journalist for the.
He was a journalist for a while. He worked in the police department for a while. He did this. Tree May is another David Simon series. But there's a document called the Wire Bible.
Yeah.
It's his pitch document and all the prep he had before it was a show. He had this, and you read it and you see how detailed and if you watch the show and you read it, you're like, wow, this dude had everything laid out. But you also see how much change, the characters' names change, or certain small nuanced things kind of developed. Right. But that document has been very helpful as I try to create my own ideas.
Right. And you
not that I'm taking what he's doing, but the way he outlined and the way he set it up, I try to be that level of detail for my idea.
Right. And by the way, I am talking with Ramon Rivas II, and it is Blazer Ramon on Twitter and Instagram and all the things. And he's got albums. He's got a podcast called PreBaked. He's got 2 seasons of that you should go and find. And I just want to remind people that they should find you and see your stuff, man. So this is just I want there to be a hero, man. Is there a hero?
To some degree, I mean, I mean,
it's about sort of corrupted regular people in all of these jobs, in all of these different
pretty much. And then you see even these drug dealers who you assume are bad, you see these very human moments in them. In the first season, one of the drug group's enforcers who kills a bunch of people.
Yeah,
he's very caring over these fish he owns, and very worried about their care when he has to flee town because he murdered someone.
Right. So they're whole people.
They're whole people.
He's creating characters that are entire human beings, and unfortunately, they've been put in these positions where they either choose to make terrible decisions or they're kind of cornered and they make these they're forced to kind of make these compromises, which just lead to worse and worse situations. So man, holy shit. That's just insanity. Anyway, so we're on season 3, I think, or season 4.
Yeah, we're on season 3. Well, I feel like we can move on to season 4 now. So season 3 deals with the possibility of what would happen if some drugs got legalized.
Okay.
And then season 4, we see the politics takes a bigger step. Carcetti's mayoral run really gets ramped up. It becomes a tangible reality that he might become mayor. And then we're also introduced to a new group of kids. And this season adds the educational sphere to things.
Oh.
So we get the street culture, we get the police, we get politics, and this season we get the school system through the lens of this group of, I think, 4 or 5 kids who are friends. We're introduced to them at the very beginning, like the very tail end of summer. They have kind of a very innocent day. And then over the course of the season, you see the impact of like the Barksdale organization has been taken down. Avon's back in jail. Stringer Bell, that's Idris Elba, who he's another one who's gotten hugely famous since the show. But so from season 1 to season 3, he would arguably be one of the main quote unquote characters, and he's killed. Same as Game of Thrones. Don't get too attached to nobody because they probably gonna die. And so he's no longer around in season 3. So the Barksdale organization is no longer relevant going into season 4. So you see kind of the remnants of members who are still out from that group, who didn't get arrested or didn't get killed, and how they're kind of, independently operating. And then Marlowe's really just putting the stranglehold. He's telling dealers, like, you're either taking my package or you're taking these bullets, pretty much.
Yeah.
So he's got a very like ruthless demeanor to him. At the same time, though, he's trying to build up respect in streets. In the first episode, they go around, him and his enforcer go, and they just are giving kids money for go back to school money. Right.
Okay.
Just because that starts the cycle of like, I gave you something, now you do something for me.
Right. The kids are like, I'm going to go buy socks and underwear. This is going to be amazing. Yeah.
But also it makes his name ring out. Like, oh, I'm wearing this because Marlowe got me.
Yeah.
And so there's a holdover character from season 3. This ex-convict, Dennis Cuddy Wise is his name. So season 3, he gets released.
Yeah.
He kind of goes back into enforcing for the Barksdales. He realized his heart's not in it when he had an opportunity to shoot a kid and he just couldn't. He's like, whatever's in you ain't in me anymore. And so he's really one of the few redemptive arcs, not the few, but like you get a lot of positive value from his growth in the series. Right. So the tail end of season 3, he starts building a gym to kind of help with what's going on. He gets groups of kids who have been fighting in those drug-free zones, and starts kind of training them, starts to build a rapport. And then when Marlowe puts his drugs back on the street, most of the kids go back to the corner.
Right.
He doesn't give up on them. He goes and gets them back. So season 4, you kind of see him more firmly in this, like, I'm an adult, I'm training these kids, I'm kind of respected in the community. But he also has like women who just start showing up at the gym, like, I just really like what you're doing, and like, can I cook for you sometime or take you out? So like, he has women who are hollering at him, and he's just like, all right. So he
free sex, sure.
Free sex. He's just a dude he was in jail. Like season 3, he's living in his grandma's basement. Like he doesn't have anything. And so then suddenly now you're getting women who are paying attention to you and focusing on you. And so he's just being a single dude, enjoying that.
Okay.
And it winds up causing issues because a lot of them are relations to his boxers. And so some of the kids wind up feeling hurt that he abandoned their parent. But then they, instead of being able to communicate that, they just shut down, quit, and go back to drugs.
Yeah.
And so
he didn't see the consequences, and that's super real too. Holy shit. You're just like, well, why? We're all adults. Let's just go have some sex. And then there's a 12-year-old who's like, yeah, but now she's sad. Or now he's sad, and so I'm not going to hang out with you anymore.
And so like you kind of see his moral reckoning from that.
Yeah.
Slowly through the season. It's such a small series of notes.
Yeah.
But that has such a huge, it causes these kids who like showed promise at boxing to just completely, because they feel too hurt
Yeah.
to stay.
So they had to abandon it, and then they're gonna have to either find another solution or they're gonna get lost.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so brutal.
So all the kid characters from the season are just crush it. They're so great. One of the characters' name is Michael, and he winds up joining Marlowe's crew. His mom's a drug addict. You kind of get a sense of her, like she sells their food that they get with their their benefits card. She sells it to get drug money.
Mhm.
When her ex-boyfriend gets out of jail early, he moves back in with them, and you very clearly get the sense that he molested Michael, because
Yeah.
Michael just like very uncomfortable physically, like makes his little brother get away from him, and like that dude's presence is what causes him to join Marlowe's gang,
Right. Right.
because he's like, I have a problem I can't take to anyone else. Because if he went to the school counselor, oh, this man's back in my house, my mom's a drug addict, him and his brother would go into foster care and be separated.
That's it. That's it.
And so you see the choices he had, none of them were appealing, but this one is at least
Right. And he's 11.
yeah. I think in this
14,
they're in.
whatever.
I think they're going into 8th grade,
Oh,
so I think they're more like 13 or 14.
yeah.
But Bunny Colvin is involved in this season because he got fired from the police.
Mhm.
All the drama over what he did cost him this tenured faculty position he was offered at Johns Hopkins. He winds up getting offered a job in this educational study where they're trying to socialize violent offenders before they get into the system.
Mhm.
And so initially they're going to target high school people, and Colvin helps them realize that that's a bad idea because you're already set in your ways at that point. So then they scale back to middle school, which
Okay.
kind of overlaps them with some of this group of kids.
Right.
One of them has a real his relations with his mom was the wife of the enforcer from season 2 or from season 1 who like really cared about his fish. His name is Weebay.
Yeah.
So this is Weebay's baby mama. This
Right.
kid is Weebay's kid.
Yeah. Okay.
Weebay's kid don't got the game in him, but he's on the street, he's selling drugs because his mom is like, you need to go make us money.
Right.
And so you see this kid who like kind of doesn't want to have anything to do with this world, but he has to exist in it.
Right.
And he's in this group of troubled kids that Colvin is in this study with.
Right. He's gonna try.
And so Colvin takes an interest in him. By the end of the season, he winds up getting custody of him.
Okay.
And so that's another redemptive, like now this kid is like, he's got a solid home. He doesn't have to be on the court. Like the episode I told you about is called Corner Boys from this season.
Okay.
And they kind of talk about there's kids who, when their parents are like, don't go outside, they'll stay on the stoop. And then there's kids who go on the corner. The corner kids are the ones who are going to, get sucked into the system. The stoop kids are the ones who might have a chance to get out.
Yeah.
So we're taking these corner kids out of the classrooms to socialize them so that the stoop kids have a chance.
Okay.
That's what the program's kind of piloting.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also running up against No Child Left Behind and like the standardized testing that schools go through to kind of validate what they're doing.
Right.
And so the program gets shut down because the school deficit
the numbers
is like,
don't look good. Yeah.
Carcetti took over mayorship and learned that there was like a $50 million educational deficit that they'd just been rolling over.
Yeah.
And so he took office and promised the police department all these raises, all this new day, all this everything. And then in the beginning of season 4, they're like, oh, no, school system's bankrupt. So no raises for the police, no this, no that. And the morale of the police tumbles.
Tanks.
As a result. But he decides at this point to run for governor.
Oh God. because he just hasn't depressed enough people. Because that's what you want is a bunch of depressed armed police officers.
Which is, I feel like that's very real life in general too.
This all just feels like super, like just like the low level of underneath, just underneath the surface of so many different jobs are these people who are forced to make these decisions, and the corruption and not addressing certain things, and you're like, and then there's every third person is treading water so hard to try to make sure everyone around them is okay and has a chance, and trying to help someone in front of them,
Yeah, which that sounds like comedy a lot of times, just like trying to navigate the biases and everything we have to deal with around. We just want to do this thing, but we have to deal with all this bullshit.
Right. I just want to make jokes. I'm hoping to get a free taco or taquito. Maybe there's meatloaf. You don't know.
Yeah.
And just try to cheer some people up. So, that's brutal. What's season 5?
So season 5, we enter. The police have been promised all these increases in pay and servicing and financing, and they have their budget slashed to the bone. They're not getting their cars fixed. They're not getting paid their overtime. They're not like they're getting vouchers for their overtime, but they're like, the city's never going to pay y'all back. So you just have a fucking rapidly declining moral feeling within the police department. Marlo is firmly in charge of the streets, and he and then Mcnulty is drinking again. So season 2, he got put on the boat. By the end of season 2, the detail got him back on. He's working on the detail. At the end of season 3, he decides for himself to transfer back to Foot Patrol. He's very happy in Foot Patrol. He's not drinking anymore. Him and Brady are living together. He's a good father figure to her 2 kids. He's completely changed as far as like what you see from the drinking and whoring you see in the first few seasons.
Okay.
To season 4, he's like happy.
Okay.
He winds up getting one of the kids from season 1 who's still around and independently dealing. He gets him to inform, and then that kid gets killed by Marlo. And so Mcnulty starts to feel guilty. He starts to kind of believe the promises of Carcetti that it's a new day and the police are kind of actually going to get to do something to change shit. So he goes back into the detail.
Okay.
Because they're investigating Marlo, because his crew has been killing people and leaving them in vacant bodies all of season 4. Yeah. And at the end of the season, they start to pull them out, and there's 22 dead bodies that Marlo's crew has put in these abandoned houses.
Wow.
And so the detail is investigating Marlo at the beginning of season 5. They've been on him all for months, suppressing the crime simply by being on him. And then as Carcetti's trying to plug the educational budget, he stops that investigation into those dead bodies. He leaves 2 detectives on the detail who are investigating the corrupt politician from season 1.
Okay.
And they start to simultaneously run an illegal wiretap into Marlo's crew to keep, because they're like, we're too close to give up to him. We're going to keep it going.
Yeah.
In order to facilitate this, Mcnulty early in the season learns through a coroner that you can't tell if a victim is strangled pre or post death, because like some medic and police detective, they find a junkie, his head's kind of wedged into the toilet. They pull him out. In order to do that, they had to like grab his neck. And it looks like a strangle job. And the coroner is like, he's murdered. He's been strangled to death. And the detective's like, I'm going to go get the ambulance because I'm not taking this as a murder. So Mcnulty learns that you can kind of do this post staging to make a natural death look
Oh,
like
wow.
a strangle, comes across a dead homeless person and a vagrant and strangles the dead body and then says there's a serial killer on the loose and he's preying on homeless people. So he makes up
Oh,
a serial killer,
so he creates. Okay.
right? And then you start to see he's trying to get the media to cover this so that the department will open up some funds to do some proper investigating, right?
Right.
The newspaper covers it. It's a little blip. They ask him to, but we need something to sensationalize it because at the same time, there's a little snarky person on this newspaper that you get to see the newspaper squad. So this is another dying industry that's highlighted.
Yeah.
You kind of get to see this storied newspaper go through rounds of budget cuts, trying to do more with less. What they decide to cover, like they were initially going to be doing a profile on like the educational system and like what's going on in the schools, and then they pivot to cover this homeless shit because the news person, his name's Scott Templeton. He's slowly, like you see, he's very morally dubious. He starts to make up quotes. He starts to make up anecdotes. He starts to do different things. And then he's out on the street getting react quotes from homeless people, and he calls himself on a payphone and then pretends he got called by the made up serial killer.
Wow.
And so Mcnulty goes down to talk to him, and then is like, oh, this will give us justification to tap a phone, and we need to tap Marlowe's phone. So he goes along with it. So this complete lie just winds up snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. And the news starts covering it and it gets sensationalized by that. And then soon Mcnulty and his partner Freeman had been getting one of their old buddies to like give them the heads up when they come across a dead homeless person.
Yeah.
But now anytime there's a dead homeless person, the whole
everybody shows up. Yeah.
And so that's what's happening there. So it's kind of like this wagging of the dog is going on.
Right.
They wind up cracking the investigation against Marlowe. They take him
With
down.
the wire?
Just one of the biggest drug seizures in the city's history, but it's tainted because it was a result of the illegal wiretap.
Ah, okay.
Which winds up coming out. So by the end of the series, Mcnulty has to quit the force. Lester Freeman has to quit the force. Even there's no police character in the show that was good through the whole thing. They all cut some sort of corner or made some sort of compromise in order to accomplish some sort of investigation.
Yeah.
None of them are clean, right?
Right.
And you get to see Bubbles, the drug addict informant. You get to see him finally get clean. Throughout the seasons, his sister would let him stay in her basement. She'd lock the door. He couldn't stay there when she left. And the last episode, you get to see him like sit down at the table upstairs for dinner with them. Wow. And like you get to feel good.
Yeah.
But just like the details of storytelling, or like there's one specific, it's the minorest of characters.
Okay.
In season 3, during when there's these drug zones.
Yep.
There's a very quick scene where there's a white girl in the backseat of a car. They pull up. The dealer asks her what she needs. She's like, "Let me get an 8-ball," and he's like trying to make small talk with her. She's like, "If you don't mind, can we just get the drugs?" He's like, "All right, just try and be friendly." Mm-hmm. Boom. You don't see her again, right?
Yeah.
Season 4. There's a prostitute in a convenience store just buying a pack of cigarettes, buying something to drink. And the store clerk was like, "Why you let him go upside your head like that, girl? I treat you better." She's like, "You don't know him. He loves me." It's the same girl. So this girl who was just buying an 8-ball, looking like she was having fun. Now she's turning tricks.
Right. And is getting beaten up.
Season 5, this character pops up in the very beginning of an episode in a cold open in one of Bubbles' NA meetings, and she's speaking, and she's talking about, I told myself I'd never turn tricks. I told myself I'd never do two dudes at a time. I told myself I'd never have sex without a condom. And I was just making a list of things I do when my inner addict told me that I needed something.
Whoa.
And her total screen time over the seasons is maybe 3 minutes.
God. But they same actress.
Same actress. So it's like you get these little richnesses if you can catch them.
Yeah.
But that specific random character, I don't even know if she's named in the series.
Right.
But that little detailed thing is kind of why I like that show so much. And I like this show, like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, where the world building is very specific and particular.
Right.
The first, when Game of Thrones was working off the book, I felt the same way. Once they started going off book, it got kind of ridiculous.
Did you see Deadwood?
I did. I love Deadwood.
Yeah, Deadwood has some amazing world building as well.
Yeah,
right?
but also Deadwood's another one that's hard to sink into just because they don't give you any translation for the language.
They just stop you in the middle of it, and they're just like, here it is. Feel free to keep turning around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made it, I think, 2 seasons with that. And because, again,
Season 3 is kind of end. The movie was pretty decent. Okay. But it's interesting to like have watched Deadwood after I read this book, An Indigenous People's History of the United States, which kind of talks about how the country went from coast to coast, and they would like treaty with natives, and then settlers would go squat, engage in warfare with the natives. Once the balance of whites to natives changed, they would annex the territory, and then it would become a state. So that's how they did the whole thing. And so Deadwood is about a territory that gets annexed and becomes a state. So it's like the entertaining version of this thing I read in the book.
Yeah, an actual thing that happened.
Yeah.
And these stories are so there's just really, really good work being done in storytelling right now. And I don't know. Sometimes I feel like we're living in I don't know if you ever read Watership Down, but there was a chapter in it where they find these rabbits who are living the good life, these rabbits. And it's because they're right on the edge of a farm, and the farm throws out all these lettuces. And these traveling rabbits, they go to the warren where these fat and happy rabbits are, and they're like, this is amazing. The farmer just gives you these lettuces, and the rabbits are like, yes. And then at night, all of these fat and happy rabbits write the most amazing poetry and these amazing stories. And the traveling rabbits are like, this is so amazing, this life. And they find out that the farmer has set up snares throughout their warren, and they allow it because they're just unwilling to move. They're unwilling because it's too easy to stay. And sometimes I feel like we're living in that.
Yeah.
The shining wire. It's so, and I have a hard time with storytelling that's so real and so great. I know how great it is, and I know how real it is, but it hurts my heart so much, and I have to spend so much of my time trying to make people be happy.
Yeah.
That sometimes it kind of sucks that energy from me. So but I loved hearing. I want to hear the story, Ramon.
Yeah.
And I got to hear the story. I got to hear all 5 seasons, and I didn't have to. They
didn't have to go through the emotional journey.
Yeah, and at least 3 times, just the hairs on my arms just came up. So
nice.
What a great telling of this thing. Thank you so much for being on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So great. I know that this is probably going to take a couple of minutes, but why did they call it The Wire?
The Wire, they called it that because of the wiretapping.
Because of was there wiretapping throughout the whole thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I hoped it was that simple, and so it was.
Yeah. And then each season is the same theme song, but it's a different version every season. And so you get that's a fun
cool.
little
That's
extra
a fun
ripple.
Dude. Ramon Rivas II, you guys.
Yes.
And it is Blazer Ramon .com and at Blazer Ramon on all the things, and check out his album and check out his podcast. And that is called PreBaked. And thank you so much for doing the show, Ramon.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Jackie.
You're welcome. And
I look
Rangers,
forward to my Dork Forest shirt.
You're gonna get it.
I'm gonna send you one of my shirts back. We're gonna have a shirt exchange.
Shirt exchange. Rangers, you know the rules out there. Take care of each other.
My hat, my hat, my hat. They're dancing around my hat. My hat, my hat, my hat. Well, what do you think of that? If it looks like a Mexican hat dance and it sounds like a Mexican hat dance, it's most likely a Mexican hat dance. So take off your hat and let's dance.
Yay! Oh my God. Why don't we just call that as the end of the show?